Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
So it's 9:01 in California, so the world is starting. Shall we, Lisa, shall we begin? Do you want to introduce today's extra special guest?
Extra special is the word. I'm holding up her book, Creating a Salon. If you aren't already uh, knowing about this book or haven't already read it, please get it through your local independent bookstore or through bookshop.org. Pick a bookstore. If you don't have one, we can suggest many, like Main Street Books or Plenty, but or Kepler's or any of them on the call. Linda-Marie Barrett, welcome. You are the executive director of the Southern Independent Bookstore Association, and here in that capacity, we're hoping to get some insights from you, but also really dive deeply into this great work, which is a big piece of the work that we all are trying to do, which is creating dialogue and meaningful conversation. So creating a salon, the magic of conversations that matter. And I'm gonna leave off the introduction and the bio with that and just say welcome. Let's dive in. So
All right. Thank you so much for having me here today.
well, thank you. And rather than me, this book is it was so fun. I'm learning to play mahjong, and I went to a friend's house and I saw it there on her end table there in her living room, and I said, "Oh my goodness!" And so it was so fun just to see the book out in the wild and in a place that I didn't put it. There's an hand sale. So it looks like it's been met with a lot of reception, and to me, it kind of sits in a unique spot that's really helpful to us that care about conversation. What
Mhm.
you talk about it a little bit in your introduction, but what led you to, in this moment, for indie bookshops, and others to talk about creating a conversations that matter or a salon?
Well, the original impetus for the book was I started a salon in 2016 or 2017 when I was transitioning from, I was the general manager at Malaprop's Bookstore in Asheville, North Carolina. And then I was transitioning to work for SIBA, which is a work from home position. And so I really wanted to make sure that I kept up with connecting with people, and I wanted to increase my friend circle and just have those really great deep conversations. That I did host a book club, and I still do host a book club with Malaprops, but I wanted to go off book and talk about some issues that were of interest to me and hopefully to the people that I invited to my salon. And that experience of hosting salons over the last 10 years has been really transformative to me. And during the COVID era, I really realized that a lot of people were feeling kind of isolated and disconnected from others in their community. And gatherings have always been so important to me. I love hosting them. I loved hosting them at the bookstore. I love hosting them personally. And now with SIBA, we create really big events, and I'm very thoughtful about that too. So I wanted to, with this book, encourage people to have salon gatherings or any kind of gatherings, really, but think about um, offering some best practices, but also encouraging people to think about how they would want to host them and how to serve those who are attending and also serve the mission that you create as host too. I think it's a great time to really encourage those kind of gatherings now because especially during a time which feels very divisive. And we also often get our community through social media, which is very different than in-person gatherings, as I'm sure everyone here knows.
Lisa, do you want to talk about for a minute about the difference between for a bookstore, independent bookstore, an author event and a salon, and where what the overlap is, and you know what I mean? Where
Yeah.
the most basic process is an author event to gather people, but you're talking about something I think a lot more powerful in a way.
Uh, did you want me to jump in there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. I think he said Lisa and meant Linda Marie. So yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
I'm sorry. I
Yeah.
meant Linda. I'm sorry. Linda Marie. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Well, I was the event coordinator at Malaprops, and I loved hosting author events there. And at the time I was doing that, I did like to, like a salon type author event would be like more interactive with the audience, most likely than your ordinary author event that can be in conversation with another author. But there are ways that I would suggest for bookstores, if they wanted to do a salon series that involves authors, that could take it to another level. That if the bookstore was into it and their community was into it, there could be things like, after the event. I think Sherry Stauk is here from Main Street Reads, where you would have an author event, and then after the author event, the author is willing to go deeper into conversation with the audience about the subject of their book, um, or taking the author out to dinner, like a special group has a either pre-event or after-event um, dinner where the people that are there could go into more conversation. Or you could, for events, you could invite two people that might represent parts of your community that are at war with each other or in conflict, and have them, try to bridge divides, have them talk about their positions, and the audience could then dig into the topic, possibly with a moderator, about, what they're seeing and any concerns they have. Like there are a lot of ways I think you could take an author or authorless event to a deeper level conversationally and a more interactive level conversationally than what's often seen at a traditional author event.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And
do you
I,
think?
yeah.
No, go ahead.
What you're describing for a lot of people would feel like a big leap of out of safety
Mhm.
because I think a lot of people don't feel safe being in the room with the level of heat and the level of dissension that exists between, like you mentioned, getting two different groups together.
Mhm.
And I love the way you describe facilitation and such, but uh,
Mhm.
walk us through a few of the things that you pointed out in the book about how to alleviate that concern and how to get people in the room in a way that they don't feel like they're going to get hurt, you know?
Mhm. Well, I do think that there has to be, in that kind of scenario, a willingness to be uncomfortable. But like, to use an example from my time at Malaprops, we had an event where someone was prologuing and we knew from people coming to us that there was going to be protesters. So a local nonprofit mediation center, we reached out to them and they brought in someone who was trained at mediation to be there. And because we didn't want to put the bookstore staff in the position that could feel very uncomfortable, and they don't have the training necessarily to moderate conflict. And it worked out fine. I think, other things you can do is, if you're a bookstore and you're hosting an event like that, is to, have messaging on the front end about code of conduct and expectations of those who are there, and also speaking to your staff and making sure the people are comfortable with how you're going to approach this. Um, and if they're not, then having a conversation about that and seeing what assistance could happen that would make them feel more comfortable. In a salon scenario, like if you're alluding to like my private salon, um, we for that salon, I created a kind of ground rules of conversation that everyone had to agree to be part of the salon. And people, before they accepted the invitation, they did say, without those ground rules, I probably wouldn't have felt comfortable being vulnerable in these kind of conversations. And there's confidentiality, respecting confidentiality, um, nonviolent communication, not interrupting each other, um, sharing time, making sure that everyone speaks, things like that. You could adapt those
Yeah.
to a bookstore scenario, or if you have a bookstore-led book club, you could use rules like that with the book club to make sure it feels like a comfortable and space and as safe a space as you can manage.
Well, I know a few
Yeah,
years ago
so
we
I'll
initiated
break in.
a lot. Oh, go ahead, Sherry.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, so I loved Linda Marie's book early on, blurbed it, adored it. And we had just started very coincidentally started doing some salons ourselves with things that weren't going to be like a big theater event kind of stuff, and books that did have deeper themes and meanings for discussion. And we do, so we do all of those as book with tickets. So you're kind of controlling that aspect of it, of the audience. And then we send them, the reminder the week out that includes those rules, but not heavy handed. It's just like we do, like, hey, space safe, or safe space, conduct notes. And then where appropriate on some of these salons that we've done, we say, by the way, here's a list of questions that we'll be kicking off with, and sort of give them that in advance. And again, they feel safer walking into that space.
Mm.
That's a good thing. Linda-Marie, you had such a great experience of a salon. Thank you, Sherry, for that. It's exciting, the work that you're doing, and the work that all of us we're kind of all dipping our toes in this and doing in many levels. I was about to say that the book clubs that we started a couple of years ago have now matured, and some of those groups have taken off into their own, and now we're focusing on how to prepare group book club leaders to facilitate, trying to teach facilitative skills to those who have not been acquainted with them. And the Salon book really is a great resource for that. Why don't you walk us through that first salon for you, and what it was, what it became, and how it became that, and just give us a picture of that deep salon that gave you this deep impression.
So yeah, so my what I did was I created those ground rules, as I said, and I thought about, and I think this is good for bookstores when you're thinking about your events too. I thought about the mission of the salon, and what I wanted to get out of it and what I hope for folks. And I thought of a name and the format, the structure. I thought of all that before I did it, and then I sent out invitations, and everyone accepted, which was very exciting. And we all met at my house. I was looking up in preparation for this. I was trying to find out, what did we talk about for that first salon? And our first salon was on dreams and goals that we hope to accomplish. And some of the people in the salon I was friends with, actually, some of them were from my book club. Others were writers in the community, and then there were people that I wanted to know more that I'd seen in yoga or other classes. And our format was, the conversational format was round robin. So I had already front loaded some questions, kind of like Sherry described. I had already sent out some questions that I wanted to go over. And we went around the room one by one, sharing about our dreams. And then I had us break up into smaller groups. And that was good because some people are nervous about talking in a bigger group. And so when you break people up into small groups of 3 or 4, the introverts feel a little more comfortable. And I described this in the book too, that like witnessing the group being vulnerable and supportive of each other, fulfilling their dreams, was so gratifying, because I felt the support, and I think everyone in that room felt the support to achieve their dream, whether it was a small, what seemed small, or if it was a huge dream, like sending a book off to to an agent, trying to get an agent, or maybe trying to get a new job, or, a fitness goal. So it was very moving, and we then began having salons every few months on different themes. And we started out as a bigger group, and now we're a core group of 9 people, which seems like a perfect number.
Yeah. So 9 to what's too big for a salon to be effective?
No, I think you could have a larger group, but just I saw Sherry's comment about breaking into smaller groups. In the book, I recommend you could have a larger salon for sure. If you had a book club or a group that was like 20 people, I think that would be fine if you gave it enough time. But I would have the small breakouts for my group, because we meet in my home. 9 is really good. It works for the space that I have. And also, there's that thing, I don't know if you've read the book by Lynn McTaggart about the power of 8. There, there's science out there about the power of small groups to do really innovative things. And so there's something about the energy in a smaller group that's it's not so small. We bring in a lot of different perspectives, but it just seems to work very well for us. But the templates that I use in the salon, I hope that they would work for lots of different sizes and scenarios.
How do you, Maria, how do you relate that to what are sort of the muscle memory of bookstore fans and bookstore staff, which is author events, in which they
Hmm.
tag on at the very end some questions from the audience, and then the moderator usually takes up half that time. So it's kind of,
Yeah.
in terms of a conversation, it's a very different kind of thing. How do you, in this, putting it in the setting even of a bookstore with 8 people or 10 people, how do you adjust for that or get people to adjust for that?
I think like the ideal audience for salons is a book club more than an author event because book clubs meet to discuss one book, which could be one idea. They could change, they could morph into a salon pretty easily. And I think it would be easier to take the book club into salon kind of scenarios. Like I mentioned, there's so many like Steve, you were mentioning earlier about the movie industry. One idea would be taking your book club and talking to the local movie theater and maybe viewing a movie. And then after you see the movie theater owner or the local critic talks to your book club about the differences between the book and the movie. Or if you have a cookbook club, you could you could have your cookbook club at a restaurant in town that features a cuisine that you all are, you're reading a book around maybe a certain kind of cuisine. So you go to that restaurant and the restaurant owner would talk to your book club about the cuisine and this is why they love this cuisine. I think a book club group would be an easier one for a store to level up into a salon format. It's because book clubs are also, more interactive and people are used to sharing ideas. And the book club leader, especially after they've had training through Lisa's program, the book club leader is usually skilled at moderation of a group of people. But I think a lot of authors, and maybe some of you could speak to this, but I think a lot of authors would be really into a salon as well, because like in our town, the local bookstores will have author events, special author events at speakeasies and other kinds of cool bars. And that setting would be perfect for the author to be in conversation with, another author or perhaps an expert in the field, and then to engaging the audience to kind of dig, if the author was willing, to dig deeper into the topic. And it would be a very memorable evening, I think, for everyone, and maybe pique the interest of authors to be, it could be something if you were pitching this to the publisher that makes your store stand out, that you're so creative in how you want to do the author events.
Mhm. Well,
Yeah.
there's these levels that you're talking in, which are really interesting. We know that the Surgeon General in 2023 said loneliness is an epidemic in the U.S. And so, bookshops have been working vigorously in lots of creative ways to get people connected. And micro events are really a key strategy, like you're mentioning. And you do talk, and you just were talking about the importance of curating the space, that the bookshop is not, and this podcast is called Beyond Bookstores, so bookshops are not the only place. And you mentioned one of, your 50 Shades of Gray meeting in the children's section, and
Yeah,
so tell us
fail,
about,
total fail.
well, tell us about the art of finding the right spot for the level of intimacy that you're looking for.
Um, yeah, so for my book club, and you mentioned 50 Shades of Grey, we were meeting in the bookstore at that time. It was a romance book club that was called All Romance All the Time. And our last book was 50 Shades of Grey. And after that, we decided we wanted to, go more broad. But we were meeting at that time in the children's section of the bookstore, and it was not comfortable for us or the people browsing that section. We were literally whispering the whole time. So we found there's a wonderful place in Asheville called the Battery Park Book Exchange. That's a champagne bar, and we started meeting there so that we could also people wanted to have um, cocktails or mocktails with the book club. And our book club, the often it can be like 20 or 25 people meet, sometimes smaller. So we wanted a bigger space, but one that could comfortably accommodate folks. So, but that is one of the things that bookstores I've loved seeing is how they go off site for so many different size events. So that way publishers know, you shouldn't be looking at the footprint of the bookstore because anything is possible and any kind of partnership might be possible. I do know you had mentioned about sustainability in this. And so I think that when you're doing these kind of events, thinking about like how it's sustaining you as the host, and then how is it sustaining the store and the staff involved, both monetarily and sustaining your mission, in each of those. And partnering up with different people around town, different venues around town can be one of those ways that supports both if you can monetize it and create those relationships.
Yeah,
Right.
it's interesting because we talk a lot about the importance of an adjacent or interior coffee shop or restaurants or something. Like City Lights, has a famous Beat Generation bar, Vesuvio's across the alley, and the alley's Kenneth, I think it's Kenneth Reckroth alley. And but we've never talked about whether if you took a really intimate and much more engaging salon, which is what you're talking about, which I think is far preferable to just a speaking event by an author that who's traveling around saying the same thing at every bookstore. I think it's much better. The question is, I suppose for publishers and bookstores, does it build a more of a audience base for the bookstore? Does it make the bookstore more distinctive? Does it expand? The
Mhm.
same way having, a bar across the street, or like Kepler's has a restaurant right next to it where you can go get coffee and talk to people. And it's a great combination. I think Praveen's on and they have that advantage. How do you see that? I mean, how do you see your salon events building an audience for a bookstore and for a publisher?
Well, I think it would be a good idea potentially maybe people, this is something you've already done, but polling your customers, like sending out a poll to your customer base about what they're looking for in events, and also talking to your staff about what might excite them around events and what's not exciting. Um, and so I think that's good to see what they're looking for. But many stores have multiple book clubs going on, and the more engaged your book club audience is, because they can be your most loyal book loving customer base, um, developing those relationships and being able to tell publishers you have so many book club members is powerful. And also I think, and I've seen that the imagination, the creativity you show in how you develop events will catch their eye as something that you're doing. And you can figure out how to monetize. I think it's figuring out how to monetize this because it's not usually an author event based. If it's book club based, then figuring out how to monetize it. I see that some stores, their book clubs, like I was noticing at Fountain Books, you must purchase the book to be part of that book club. Like there's a value to the book club discussion. And I know bookstores can sometimes be hesitant about that, but these kind of meaningful gatherings, if you're creating a really meaningful gathering, often people will pay to be part of that because they're not getting that in other areas of their life. But if monetizing it is not part of your mission because you want to, you could monetize some, but not monetize others because of accessibility. However, you can show that you have developed a really engaged, diverse customer base, I think will help you for pitching for author events. And then again, as I said, if you wanted to turn any of these, if you see an author touring who's representing something that you think could be a really cool salon idea, you could have a really large audience, but possibly, salons, there are salons where an expert talks to an audience, but just maybe figure out a way to make it more participatory than the usual author event where it's two people on stage, like those big events where there's two people on. Well, you could have a really big event with two people on stage, but maybe think about a way, in Broadway where there's people going out into the audience and talking to people. Maybe think about how could we engage the audience so that it's more of a conversation with everyone, or their input is more desired and they have like a potential real-time experience with the author. Or again, a limited group of people get to have the author before or after the event for a salon style conversation in a restaurant. I mean, that would be potentially very appealing to some authors.
Yeah,
We're
we
talking about
used to at a
salons.
nonprofit group that I was on the board of. We used to do VIP events ahead of something that cost more. Like it'd be like $10 to come hear a musician play
Hmm.
or somebody speak. But we would do a cocktail party in an adjacent sort of a space, smaller space, and that would cost
Hmm.
$100. And it
Hmm.
actually was very effective. The two fed each other in an interesting way.
They could be
Well,
a sustainer group. You know,
Yeah.
that if you have if you have sustainers or a loyalty club, part of their benefits could be these kind of special events that would be like life moments if you're in the room with these incredible authors in some form. And I think, Lisa, I think I cut you off.
no, no, I'm here to hear from you. And I agree with you. I think that being in the offer and with an author and just an opportunity to, I'm imagining an opportunity to talk with Barbara Kingsolver more deeply about
Mhm.
experiences or something that resonated in the community. So you're talking about when we're using the word salon, we're using it as any place where we've got a deeper dialogue going on and a deeper level of participation. And you've got it from the big events like how you plan the SIBA or the New Voices, New Rooms events, all the
Hmm.
way to the intimacy of your living room and people that you go on
Hmm.
vacation, that you end up having these deep conversations. So it's a continuum that can go as deep as the group wants to take it, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
And
in each case, we think about like what is the purpose of this event? Like what are we trying to accomplish? Whether it's the one in my living room or it's we're looking at a certain event at and New Voices, New Rooms. You know, that's a discussion the team will have. It's like, what do we want to accomplish here for this particular event for us and for the audience? You know, so that's
yeah.
always thinking that way about um, thoughtfulness around what we're doing, and that helps so
And
much, I think, for it to be a success.
It
and
also
the
ties
facilitators.
into it also ties into the understanding the character of your store, the distinct
Hmm.
character of your store and of your audience and how that character appeals to them, and then doing something that fits into that same strategy.
Hmm.
You're coming straight from March Madness in the Southern Independent Bookstore world, which was
Hmm.
where different stores highlighted things that they're doing well, and folks visited all over the Southeast, and I missed all of them, but grieved each of them because they each looked so very interesting. Let's take a second for you to connect this idea with salons and some of the great work that you're seeing within the Southern Bookstore Association.
Okay, and you had told me you were going to ask something about this, and I wanted to share a couple things I saw too about SIBA stores that really lean into being more than a bookstore and being that community space. I was reading in PW an interview with DJ Johnson, the owner of Baldwin and Company, and he said, to describe his store, he said, "We've evolved from being a bookstore into a cultural production company. We host events, and I think of us now as an intellectual commons. Instead of being just a retailer, we are a thinking institution. Instead of being just a small business, we are a cultural authority generating intellectual desire for Black contemporary thought." Um, and then when you go on to his site, he says, "Our mission is to inspire growth in people and communities through the power of reading." And he talks about being a community hub. And so I feel like that I know bookstores across the country are really leaning into that, like community hub, space for stories, space for connection and community. And I think that is like when you were talking about sustainability, that is a sustaining thing, I think, to be because stores are so much more than that. And when I was reading Self-Awareness when Robert Gray, one of the writers, said he had this dream about bookstores as ERs, as emergency rooms.
Yeah.
And for anyone who's been a bookseller, you know you've done that. Like where someone's come in critical condition for some reason, and you've tried to figure out what book will help heal them, or that kind of thing. Um, so I when I saw DJ's quote, I wanted to share that. But I did look around SIBA land to see some of the cool things that are happening. Um, and a couple of them are at Plenty, that sounded really cool, like your Sawmill Poetry series, which is featuring a Southern poet followed by an open mic portion with time to meet the visiting poet at the end and get a signed copy. And the Silent Book Club, which we've seen at other places too, where it's you're being in community, but silently or not. Um, the Bookworm in Powder Springs, Georgia, she has bookstore date night where you can have exclusive access to the bookstore for a certain price. And on social media, you'll see her romantic setup for the dating couple. Um, Novel in Memphis, Tennessee, they have Book It, which is an audio book walk with a novel and Libro FM. So people grab your headphones and walking shoes and you walk with the walking club. Um, they also have story time with the Youth Ballet of Memphis, which is really cool. I want to know more about that. Um, M. Judson has M. Judson is in Greenville, South Carolina. They're extremely innovative around events and they're very good at monetizing them. They have books over drinks in the evening, which includes a signed copy of the book, a cocktail or mocktail, and then author time, and then lunch and lit, which is a three-course lunch, signed copy of the book, and discussion. Um, and Parnassus has a kids' writing bookshop for middle grade readers and writers. And there's a lot of different kinds. And Main Street Reads, I don't know if I think Sherry's still here. They have signing in salons and they have Main Street Writes Mondays where people get together virtually and write. So those are some of the things I'm noticing. There's just so many different variations on events and connecting people together, whether in
Mhm.
conversation or in silence.
Yeah. And the conversation. One of the things that I love about the book is that you give us some very practical starter kits and
Mhm.
salon things. And I'm doing one of my salons is a Franklin Circle. And you may have heard me that after Ben Franklin and his Junto idea, and we talk about a virtue and do a deep dive with the same group of people over and over again, and it becomes a version of a salon for sure. And it's only 7 people, 8 people, so it's that perfect good size. But you talk about being a teaser and an enricher, being present but not being too present, when to come in, when to go out. Can you touch on some of those tips for facilitators for the things that you're teaching here in how to make sure it stays on track and that you're
Mm.
taking there? Yeah.
Sure. So one of the things, and you all may have, if you host book clubs, you may have dealt with this, is because I do have a chapter in the book about troubleshooting the unexpected. You may have
Mhm.
someone who's a dominator. They're just very gregarious, or they're just so passionate, and they don't really give space for other people to talk. So I offer tips in there about like there's different conversational formats you can use to try to avoid that scenario, which can um, that can really particularly the dominating person can take down a gathering pretty quickly. So
Mhm.
go like for us in our salon and in my book club, we actually start off round robin style, so everyone has space to talk. And when I give them a specific, I don't want to be too heavy-handed with structure, but I do give them like some guidance on how long, now they know it's been 10 years, but originally it would be like, oh, spend 3 to 5 minutes, talking about your thoughts on this question. And then the question would go around the group. And I do something similar with my book club where we rate the book from 1 to 5 and what we'd like to talk about. We go around the group. And that way, at least on the initial pass, everyone has time to speak. Um, and uh, there's other formats you could use if you want to. If you are into not having too much structure, then just as the host, watching to make sure that that everyone has a chance to speak. And sometimes calling, like people in our salon, they have the right to speak or not speak. They may not want to speak, but I do tap in with everyone to make sure that they do have time. If they've been quiet, I notice if they've been quiet, and I'll ask them at a certain point, like, did you want to say anything about this? And I try to solicit that. What other tips were you thinking about, Lisa, there?
I was thinking about getting them, they get too engaged in catching up with each other, and you want to keep them on topic
Oh,
and
yeah.
keep it moving.
Oh, yeah. So I think we even think about this with new voices, new rooms when we do events, is that when people come into a room, they usually have a lot of energy. So at my salons, the first 45 minutes of my salon is potluck and catch up time. And my book club is the same. I actually polled my book club and they responded they wanted more social time. So the first half hour of the book club is social time, and then the next hour is straight book discussion. So I think that
Okay.
thinking if you know your group or like if you're hosting an event for the store, you might have a little bit of time at the beginning to kind of dispel that energy. Um, at New Voices, New Rooms, sometimes people halfway through the day look exhausted. So we actually might ask people to stand, to stretch and, do certain things to bring the energy back up. And as host, watching the energy in the room is really important and figuring out what your tactics might be ahead of time for what you're seeing. So,
Yeah, there are different energy levels for sure as people go through this process. What about, there are also predictable stages that a group, especially a group that's going to stay together, they go through. They go through like a forming stage and a storming stage where somebody says something or passions get crosswayed, and that is needed before people get to use that acronym or that little thing, forming, storming, norming, and performing, where they embrace group norms and go on. Can you describe or think of a time where one of the times that you've been through that storming phase, that time where it got uncomfortable and you navigated it forward, and how that happened?
Yeah, I do mention that in the book. We had one salon where someone in the group said something potentially offensive and it got quiet. And as the host, whether you're the bookstore host or a personal host, it's really on you to approach that situation. I mean, at least I feel so. I feel that people are looking to you to help with that because they don't want to be rude and assume, they don't want to drive the bus. They want you to drive the bus.
Yeah.
So, but I let that sit for a moment because that person was significantly older than the rest of us. And I was like, I just had to think about it for a second. But I asked her follow-up questions, and then I felt better about it. Um, but that's part of the importance of having, and Sherry Stout mentioned this earlier too, of having those ground rules or code of conduct in place ahead of time that allows you as the facilitator to point to those ground rules. And if necessary, like if it was offensive, we would have to address it directly because, for the sake of those who would be offended. You can make it into, a gentle teaching moment if possible. Um, but that can happen and it hasn't happened often. And as you said, Lisa, like that, maybe that was in the beginning of our salons and the first year, and then we grew to know each other. And my book club, we've been together for 20 years. So I know those people really well, and they know me. We do have new members all the time. But I think as the moderator, I just keep an eye on them to make sure that we're keeping within the guidelines, in the kind of the guardrails of what's expected of members.
Linda-Marie,
We talked about
Praveen asked, what's a good duration for a typical salon? Like, what do you think?
Well, so depends on your goals and setting, but for my personal salons, they're 2.5 hours. The first almost an hour is dinner. We have a potluck dinner. And then the second hour and a half is for discussion. We've tried to go to 2 hours, and that was not enough for us. But I think it depends on your group. I would say check in with your group. If you're hosting it for a store, you might have, if you were going to have a dinner, 2 hours seems plenty long. At a person's house, 2.5 hours seems good. It would be something I would probably follow up with your participants to see how they felt about it. But you can also, we talked about, you can feel the energy in the room. And the group that I'm with, I have to cut it off. I would rather cut it off while it's still energized than that feeling when you've been at something and it's just like, oh, that could have stopped a half an hour ago.
Yeah, yeah,
As
yeah.
it peters out, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Easty has a question there too that let's get to
Well,
some of the
and the last
questions
one
and
is
see.
not Saint Book Club,
At
it's the
Ernst and Hadley
Silent.
Books, yeah.
You see, go ahead
Go
and
ahead,
ask your
Easty. You
question.
can.
Yeah.
Well, we have at Ernst and Hadley in Alabama, we have 4 different book clubs. And Linda-Marie, hello, it's good to see
Hi.
you. We have 4 book clubs, and they're all extremely different. The most recent one is the Absurdist Book Club, which basically arose out of our president. And then the Women's Studies has been around for 40 years, and the Classics is probably another recent one based on books that are more than 30 years old. And that one in particular is the one that has the most diverse attendance. There's a Morrison scholar and a football coach at the University of Alabama. So you want to talk about strange bedfellows. But you know what? It all kind of works. And I thought that, the football coach and the Morrison scholar might be at it. But, it's when you get in that atmosphere, people kind of become naturally, I saw it happen and I can't believe my eyes, how willing they were to listen and kind of put their personal strifes aside. But it's not Saint Book Club, it's Silent Book Club at the end there. TM autocorrect. But it's the Silent one is one that we created for introverts, and it's a national organization, but I'm sure there's other people that have it. But the Silent one is for introverts, where they come in with their own book, and they congregate for a little while, maybe with food that we've provided, and then because they want to be left alone eventually, they go up into different corners of the bookstore. And it really kind of works. I was very pleasantly surprised how well it worked. And
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but do they go off to different corners of the bookstore to talk or to read their book?
To read their book.
Wow.
Which is really kind of neat. I have to tell you, Linda-Marie, yesterday I'm head of the Literacy Council in our 9-county area in Alabama. And we talked about doing a community book club. And I actually talked to them about your book, and then I forgot we were going to have this thing today until I got the wonderful message from Steve. But your book, I'm giving your book to everybody on the board so that they know how, because you can see the question marks in their head. How is this going to work with such a large community? And I'm thinking, okay, this is a manageable thing. We can do this, and I'm gonna let the book speak for it. And
I think that's a wonderful idea, EC,
yeah,
especially because, Linda, you're describing there's so many different ways people can go with it. They can create something from a very small group to a larger group to a different thing. So it's really about the intention of creating
and I
things.
can see how different breakouts could happen, different smaller groups.
And a silent book club, obviously, they're not in dialogue, but they're in light dialogue. So for the socially anxious or someone, they have a chance to have an acquaintance that they can say hello to, and that's a level of knowing someone that's better than isolation. And then there's the 2.5 hour salon, which would be a chance to go more deeply. One of the questions that Praveen just raised is one that I had too. Trying to do it online or on Zoom, on some kind of digital platform versus the visceral feel of being in person. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, I do mention that in the book because we had the COVID era and we could not meet in person. So I took my personal salon online, and we added sensual elements that at the time made sense. Like I said, everyone burn a candle in the background, like do something or you could have, we ate dinner at the same time. Like we couldn't have potluck together, but we could all enjoy that social time before we got into it. And I also think a salon could be really great if, say, a group of friends, this is non-bookstore, but if a group of friends, you're now all over the country and you all want to talk about what's going on now, like, maybe something politically, or you want to talk, maybe you're getting to a certain age where we just recently had a salon on death. If you've heard that program, Death Over Dinner, if you go to that website, Death Over Dinner, you can choose templates of discussion templates. And so you could do that online as a group. And I think you could have a really great discussion. It's not the same as in person, as far as there's nothing will replicate being in person in community with each other, at least in my feeling. But I think that shouldn't stop you from attempting this virtually. Or if you have authors that are available to you and you want to do, we mentioned earlier that bridging differences to cultures that might be perceived as at war with each other, that could be a fascinating virtual salon that there's so much is possible virtually that may not be possible in person, which I see Eileen Denkler's here. There were things available to us during the COVID era, New Voices, New Rooms. We streamed in authors that we could never have outside of a COVID era and had amazing conversations online. So with the right facilitator, the right circumstances, and then keeping it engaged so that audiences could participate. I've also done this with authors for my book club, the book club that's with Malaprops, where I'll contact the author and our book club will meet virtually. And then the author will come in after we've talked about the book and talk to us. And that's been like another level book club experience. So it would be different, but I think there's ways you could stage it and negotiate it that could be its own thing. It would be different than an in-person, but be its own great virtual experience.
I love that. I love that answer. And I love the idea of incorporating some of the rest of the senses,
Mhm.
the olfactory or eating together
Mhm.
at the same time, burning a candle. That
Yeah.
What seems to come up a lot, Linda-Marie, is not only do bookstore staff and owners have to have the skill to interact with customers in the store, which is key to hand selling, and not immediately hitting them with like, what are you looking for? But just letting them look and they can I help you, which is something we've talked a lot about on this show. But now also how to be a moderator in an event and draw people out, shut other people down a bit, it's fascinating. There's all these skills that you need to develop as a bookshop manager, owner, or staff member.
Well, your book club hosts can be natural salon leaders. And I love what Lisa mentioned early on is that you're now training your facilitators, you're offering, training because it can be challenging. And there are also people in your community that you could call upon that may be trained facilitators that are happy to donate their time. Like we have the mediation center in Asheville that happily offered their experience for events that we wanted. We didn't want our staff to be in the middle of a very divisive situation. That's skills that come with professional training. So I think one shouldn't be daunted by some of these obstacles, but it's really good to talk to your staff about what they're excited about. And there may be some that are excited to do this, and then there may be others that step back and that's not what they're into.
Well,
Yeah.
there's several of our staff that have the counseling credential and have some of that background, but we've definitely brought people in with therapy backgrounds, counseling, because it's really important and not to open something you can't close. So one of the things, and I'd love to talk about that for just a second, because sometimes people they come in bleeding, they haven't been in a group before, or they haven't been in a group in a long time. And it's the opposite of not sharing, it's oversharing. They dive in and they say, my husband just left me and my dog just died and I've got cancer, and they just open it all up, and now you've got this situation that's very hard to close.
Mhm.
and leave them okay, for the group. So do you do any coaching, or let's talk for a second about how we coach folks to help be aware of that tendency for people to overly self-disclose, to put too much in, and what as a
Mhm.
facilitator we can do to help put guardrails around it for folks.
Mhm. Well, we did talk about earlier having the ground rule, conversational ground rules, and that can also be in a bookstore scenario, a code of conduct that you can point to. And then I think it's important for whoever is the moderator to be confident enough to steer conversation away from the person who's oversharing. And because otherwise if you're feeling nervous as the moderator about their behavior, everyone else is likely feeling that way too. So addressing it as soon as possible and explaining to them that this is not like in the case where someone's oversharing, that's explaining that we're really here to address whatever it is. Like it could be the topic of the book, or we're looking at the book now, and you have a social hour after this where that might be more appropriate to share. So I think continuing back to going back always to your conversational ground rules, and it may be that they can't be shut down, in which case you need to just really address them. That would be horrible. I mean, that's like a horrible situation. That's where the Booksellers is ER situation where they may need more from you than you thought you would need to give of yourself, but I would then take them aside and speak to them privately to not embarrass them in front of the whole group. That's what I would do. I like your idea, Lisa, in a professional setting to offer all of your moderators some level of training from a professional who could help that. And there's that great book on nonviolent communication that's really helpful to read to understand some important guidelines around addressing things like that in a way that is respectful of the person who might be going through a lot.
Yeah.
What's the title of that book?
It's nonviolent communication.
Yep.
I
Yep.
Mhm.
think I think I might have a copy back here, but I'd have
Yeah.
to get up and
That one,
rummage
and
through
you also, this is a good time to mention some of those other books, are those who want to learn more. I mean, The Art of Gathering, you mentioned by Priya, um, eh, that is a must-have for
Yes.
people. Yeah.
Hmm.
We'll put some
Yeah.
of those titles in the follow-up email with the YouTube recording
Okay.
of the thing.
Yeah, we'll
Well,
add that.
one of the things
Hey,
that Lisa, one of the things that we did, I worked with a friend on an alternative to Zoom, and a lot of it was about training moderators. One of the things we did is we developed an app that kept track on a thermometer of everybody who was talking, so everybody could see who had talked how long. It was over in the corner. It really stifled the extroverts like myself. But
Mhm.
that's
that's a
virtually,
really
that was virtual. You can't do it, you can't do it in a room.
What a
Mhm.
great idea, self-monitoring and that sort of thing. And I know too, the opening things that are hard to close. There's some really good empathetic responses that can, I hear you, and what you're raising is bigger than this group has the capacity to help you with
Mhm.
right now.
Yeah.
And I want to hear you and appreciate that you're offering a lot. Let's talk afterward, or thank you for doing. I mean, it's something that helps you close it up, and just be aware. And I guess this is a question I wanted to ask you. As a leader, how do you think about the questions, and making sure great leaders ask great questions? How do you frame the questions in a way that is going to keep things going? And you
Mhm.
mentioned this in the book some about the art of asking good questions and that keep the group focused.
Yeah, so before every salon, I do think of questions that are not an easy yes or no, but are something that will guide you into thinking about something in a deeper or larger or an unusual way that you may not have thought about that subject before with that in mind. So, so trying to avoid these questions that would be very, very easy for you to answer, again, yes or no. And I always have them in my pocket, ready to ask, even in book club as well. A little bit of prep and coming up with these questions. And for me, can tend to be like a clipboard person. So I'll just have my sheet of like, these are my questions that I can go to. I do a bit of research on the subject. And if it's my goal for my participants of my salon is for them to think about this in a way that hasn't occurred to them before and maybe will spark something even beyond the subject. And that's what they say that they get out of it. Maybe it'll lead them to think about, and then they'll think of some way to approach that question that will spark something in someone else. So they don't have to be very complicated questions, but just I'll like it's almost like a globe. Like I'll just come at it from different angles and try to have a bunch of potential angles. And then as a moderator, always again, seeing what's happening in the room and among your participants and being ready to pick up the energy or in the case of the overshare to kind of calm the energy. And I really like what you said, Lisa, about it's just like having those questions ready, having your responses ready. If someone is an overshare, like you said, there's those like certain responses you can say that can kind of calm down the energy if necessary. But it takes a bit of research. I think most gatherings like this, a salon is a very thoughtful kind of gathering. So the preparation you put into it as host will really pay off in it being a rewarding experience for those who attend it.
I think one of the things that we need to explore more in other sessions, and Linda-Marie, you're really expert at this, is the power of a salon or a book group to drive more attention and participation in a bookshop, in a bookstore. You know, we understand how author events, the expectation with author events is they'll sell the book that the author is talking about, which becomes frustrating sometimes is that they don't sell enough books and then people don't want to do anymore. We're talking about a completely different animal here that's much more engaging, personal, and emotional. And I think it's really powerful, but figuring out how it fits a strategy of a bookstore's becoming successful and sustainable is a fascinating question to me.
That reminded me, I just want to put this in there, is that when I was at Malaprops, we had a really big section up front that was what the book clubs across town were reading, not just our book clubs, but any book club. And the book club selections are such a reflection of your community and what your community is thinking about and discussing and passionate. Like it's very powerful. So we put that right up front so that people could see it. And I think that's really interesting for publishers too, because you can show you may, even if you're a certain, like a niche bookstore in some ways, your book clubs could represent so many points of view and so many possibilities for authors to come because you have an audience for that in your community. You just need to tap into that particular audience for that event. But
Yeah,
I almost more than staff picks, I love book club picks.
that's brilliant. I think that's really important.
Wonderful. What a wonderful thing for us to dive into because it's at the heart of what we're trying to do. We're connecting people in real ways and and what I just love celebrating are all of the fascinating ways that people are finding to bring people together and connect them. And I love that you've given us an opportunity here to figure out how to go as deeply as your group wants to go. How to really create those pockets of community that feel deeply connected because they've had conversation about something that wasn't just today's news cycle, or something light, or what is it? Eleanor Roosevelt said that the most interesting people don't talk about other people or talk about the news. They talk about ideas. And so you've got us talking about ideas and thinking about how to take that so deeply. And I think that's at the heart of our work. And I just really appreciate you with this book and want to encourage everybody to get it and promote it. It is a great, as AC was saying, it makes a great community-wide read. And it's a great read for all of us who are working in this space to think about, and it's got this wonderful pragmatic Kickstarter how-to practical guide. There's a lot to it that's very pragmatic, and I just treasure the opportunity to explore that with you, and that's something we haven't had on Beyond Bookstores before. It's really the
Yeah.
opportunity to talk about facilitation in this important piece.
We
Thank
should go
you.
now because it's the hour, but this has been fantastic. Thank you, Linda-Marie. It's really
Thank you. This was really wonderful.
all right.
Wonderful.
Lisa,
Thank you,
any
everybody.
final goodbye, Lisa?
just appreciate you, Steve, keeping us together and making this happen.
Nah, you keep us.
And Linda-Marie for your preparation and being here, and everybody who comes. And this will be on Zoom, right? And you're going to send it out, and we'll have opportunities, and not on Zoom, but you'll have a recording of it that we can
Yeah,
share with others.
It'll go out tomorrow, probably.
Yeah. And a book list with it. So
and a book list,
that's
and a
always good.
transcript, and a summary, and
All the
and
stuff.
and the recording of the chat and all that.
You're
Yes.
awesome.
All
Thank you
right.
so much.